It's one of the strangest contradictions you'll ever see. On one side of the street, a tiny pirate is laughing so hard he can barely hold on to his candy bucket. Across the road, a little witch is arguing with her older brother over who collected more chocolate. Parents are smiling, neighbors are chatting, porches are glowing with carved pumpkins. For a few hours, the whole neighborhood feels warmer than it has all year. Halloween has become a celebration of laughter, of costumes, of candy, of childhood. But hidden inside that cheerful tradition is a question almost nobody asks. Why do children knock on strangers' doors at night while wearing disguises and ask for food? When you really stop to think about it, it's an oddly specific tradition. We don't do it at Christmas. We don't do it on birthdays. We don't do it on any other holiday. Yet, every October, millions of families repeat the exact same ritual without wondering where it came from. Because the answer isn't as sweet as the candy. It's surprisingly dark. Long before Halloween became a family celebration, people believed this was the one night of the year when the dead came home. Not symbolically, not in stories. They believed it as confidently as we believe the sun will rise tomorrow. And if that sounds impossible today, that's only because we're looking at the past with modern eyes. Go back 2,000 years. Forget electricity. Forget brightly lit cities. Forget weather forecasts and scientific explanations. When the sun disappeared behind the hills, darkness wasn't just an inconvenience. It changed the world. The familiar path leading home suddenly looked unfamiliar. Every movement in the trees demanded your attention. A branch snapping in the distance wasn't automatically a deer. Sometimes, your mind filled in the blanks with something far more frightening. People didn't need horror movies. Nature supplied enough mystery on its own. Now, add another layer to that world. Imagine your grandparents telling you that one particular night every year, the boundary separating the living from the dead became so thin, spirits could simply walk across. Your parents believed it. Their parents believed it. The entire village believed it. Would you question it? Probably not. Because beliefs don't exist in isolation. They're built by generations. That's exactly what happened among the ancient Celtic people who lived across what we now know as Ireland, Scotland, and parts of Northern Europe. Their calendar wasn't divided the way ours is today. For them, the end of autumn wasn't simply another page turning. It marked the beginning of winter. And winter wasn't just colder weather. Winter was uncertainty. Food became scarce. Travel became dangerous. Illness spread more easily. Entire families sometimes failed to see another spring. So when the final harvest was gathered, people weren't celebrating what they had. They were worrying about whether it would be enough. That moment became a festival known as Samhain. Today, historians describe it as a seasonal celebration. The people living through it saw something much bigger. To them, nature itself seemed to be changing worlds. Summer, filled with warmth and life, was dying. Winter, cold and unpredictable, was taking its place. If the natural world could cross from one season into another, why couldn't the spiritual world do the same? That single idea shaped everything. As sunset approached, families finished their work early. Animals were brought closer to home. Food was stored carefully. Conversations became quieter. Not because someone ordered silence, because everyone knew what night it was. Then something happened that would seem almost unthinkable today. Every fire inside every home was allowed to go out. Picture an entire village slowly falling into darkness. One window after another, one chimney after another, until the landscape became almost completely black. Only then, high above the villages, the Druids lit enormous bonfires on nearby hills. From miles away, people could see those flames dancing against the night sky. Families walked toward them carrying empty lanterns, not because they wanted a better view, because those fires were believed to be sacred. Each household carried a small burning ember back home. That single flame would relight their fireplace for the winter ahead. It represented protection, hope, a fresh beginning. Yet even standing beside those roaring fires, people believed they weren't alone. The spirits had arrived too. Not with dramatic thunder or glowing eyes, quietly, silently, like unseen guests drifting through the crowd. That's where Halloween costumes truly begin. Today, people dress as superheroes, movie characters, zombies, vampires. It's entertainment. Back then, a disguise served a very different purpose. People covered themselves with animal skins. They wore carved masks, some blackened their faces with ash, others attached horns to their heads. The goal wasn't to frighten one another, it was to confuse whatever might be watching. If spirits couldn't recognize you, perhaps they would pass you by. Whether that belief was true didn't really matter. What mattered was that thousands of people acted on it. And when enough people repeat something year after year, it slowly transforms into tradition. That's why customs often outlive the reasons they began. We still shake hands, even though most people no longer think about proving they aren't carrying a weapon. We still blow out birthday candles without wondering who first thought that was a good idea. Halloween costumes belong to that same family of forgotten traditions. The reason faded, the habit survived. But disguises solved only one problem. They helped people hide. They didn't answer another question. If the spirits really were wandering through the countryside, what did they want? The answer people settled on was surprisingly human: hospitality. The living welcomed guests into their homes with food. Surely the dead expected the same courtesy. So families began leaving offerings outside their doors: a loaf of bread, a bowl of milk, fruit from the final harvest, sometimes pieces of meat, sometimes cakes. Not because they expected to catch a ghost eating dinner, because the act of giving mattered. It was a gesture of respect, almost a quiet agreement between two worlds. Take this and leave our family in peace. Whether anyone actually believed a spirit carried the food away is impossible to know, but people often noticed something interesting. The food was gone by morning. Maybe wild animals had taken it. Maybe hungry travelers had found it. Maybe neighbors quietly helped themselves. It didn't matter. The offering had disappeared. To many people, that felt like proof the ritual had worked. And once a tradition appears to work, it becomes incredibly difficult to abandon. Children watched their parents prepare those offerings. Years later, those children taught their own sons and daughters to do exactly the same thing. Without realizing it, they were preserving a ritual that would survive kingdoms, wars, religious change, even the collapse of entire civilizations. The remarkable part isn't that Halloween changed over time. It's that this small act of leaving food behind somehow refused to disappear. Instead, it quietly evolved into something no one could have predicted. For generations, that simple ritual never really disappeared. The names changed, The beliefs changed, even the people changed. But every autumn, someone still left food behind, for someone they couldn't see. Then the world around them began to change. New kingdoms rose, old beliefs faded. Christianity spread across Europe, bringing new traditions with it. At first, you might think that would have been the end of Samhain. Ancient festivals usually disappear when new religions arrive. But this one didn't. Instead, it did something far more interesting. It adapted. The church introduced a celebration known as All Hallows' Day. The evening before, it became known as All Hallows' Eve. Say those words quickly enough, and eventually, they become Halloween. A different name, but underneath, many of the old customs quietly remained alive. Only now, people explained them differently. Instead of leaving food outside for wandering spirits, poor families began traveling from house to house, asking for something called soul cakes. Small, round cakes, often marked with a simple cross. And in return, they made a promise. "We'll pray for your loved ones." It's easy to miss how remarkable that exchange really was. Someone knocks on your door, you give them food. They offer something back. Not money, not labor, a prayer, a blessing. Hope that someone you loved would find peace. The shape of the tradition hadn't really changed, only the story behind it had. And then, something unexpected happened. Children started joining in. At first, they followed their parents, watching, learning, carrying tiny baskets. Before long, they wanted to do it themselves. Groups of children wandered through villages together. Some sang songs, others memorized short poems. A few performed little plays outside people's homes. The better the performance, the better the reward. One extra cake, another apple, perhaps a handful of nuts. Sound familiar? Long before candy bars existed, children were already earning treats by dressing up and entertaining strangers. Without realizing it, they were laying the foundation for modern trick-or-treating. But children weren't the only ones walking through those dark streets. As the evening grew later, older teenagers took over, and they had very different plans. Halloween slowly earned a reputation for being unpredictable. One morning, a farmer would wake up and discover his front gate half a mile away. The next year, someone else's wagon would somehow end up balanced on top of a stone wall. Laundry vanished, garden fences disappeared, wooden barrels rolled into the middle of the village. Nothing was stolen, nothing was kept. Everything simply moved. The next morning became a giant puzzle. Everyone asked the same question. Who did it? Nobody knew, or at least nobody admitted it. The disguises helped. The darkness helped even more, and perhaps that was part of the fun. For one night, ordinary rules no longer seemed to apply. People expected strange things to happen, so strange things did. Some blamed mischievous teenagers, others blamed wandering spirits. Sometimes, the two were surprisingly difficult to tell apart. But eventually, the tricks became bigger, too big. Broken windows, damaged fences, escaped livestock. What had once been harmless entertainment started costing people real money. Villages needed a solution, not because they wanted Halloween to disappear, because they wanted it to survive, without the damage. That's when a simple idea quietly spread. If a group stopped at your house, offer them something, a piece of bread, fruit, coins, anything. It was a small price to pay compared to waking up and finding your gate floating in the village pond. Without realizing it, Communities created an unwritten agreement, a treat instead of a trick. Nobody held a meeting, nobody voted. The traditions simply made sense. And traditions built on common sense have a habit of lasting a very long time. Then history intervened once again. During the 19th century, Ireland faced one of the darkest chapters in its history, the Great Famine. Entire families packed everything they owned into a few wooden trunks. Many believed they would never return home. They crossed the Atlantic searching for another chance, another beginning, another life. They couldn't carry much: a few clothes, family keepsakes, old recipes, stories told around the fireplace. And tucked quietly inside those stories was Halloween. When those immigrants reached America, their traditions met dozens of others: Scottish customs, English customs, German harvest festivals, French celebrations. Piece by piece, they blended together, like streams flowing into one river. At first, Halloween looked very different from the version we know today. Some towns held harvest festivals, others organized community dances, children bobbed for apples, neighbors gathered around bonfires. It wasn't yet the candy-filled celebration we recognize. But one thing refused to disappear: the pranks. If anything, American Halloween became even wilder. Newspapers printed the same complaints year after year: street signs missing, front gates gone, wagons blocking roads, mailboxes knocked over, shop windows smashed. Police dreaded Halloween night. Homeowners dreaded the next morning. Something had to change. But how do you stop a tradition that's already woven into an entire culture? The answer turned out to be surprisingly clever. Don't fight it, redirect it. Instead of giving young people an excuse to cause trouble, give them a reason to visit every house for something much sweeter. That single idea would change Halloween forever.